All right, so this is the master section of the Audient. We got number 1 up there is the stereo input part. Number 2 are your these are the group out masters. Number 3 is the auxiliary aux masters. Number 4 is your studio section, and that's specifically the foldback section. Number 5 is your control room section, and that's specifically your speaker select and your source select above it. And then number 6 is the control room. Number 7 is the oscillator, and beneath that is the solo section. And then number 8 is your compressor. So number 4, just talking about this a little bit here, the master section, that picture over there. Yeah. So we're starting with number 4 here. We're going to take these out of order. Number 4 is your studio source selection. So the source here can be a couple things. This is what we talked about. The control room is what you're listening to as the engineer in your control room. Then you also have tape 1 and tape 2. So if you're recording to a 2-track tape, then the tape 1 and tape 2 are going to be your monitor path from your tape. So you can make sure that everything sounds good going into your tape. Aux A and Aux B are your foldback section. So if you remember, we go back to each channel over here. See, remember here, number 9 here, it says Aux A and Aux B. That's our foldback section. Well, that's what we're looking at right here. So if we want to have that sending out to our studio so people can listen to it on headphones or whatever, that's Aux A and Aux B right there, left and right. So if you want to send signal to your foldback section to your musicians in the studio, you have to push these buttons here to turn that on, to make sure that's happening. If you just want your studio musicians to be hearing what you're hearing in the control room, then you push the control room button right here. And then we've got the level here, level for how much we're sending it out to them. And usually in the studio, they can actually control how much signal they're hearing on their own end. Then we have number 3 here is the on-off button for our speakers. So if you want to turn that on-off for your speakers, or we have the solo buttons here for our foldback A and B. What that basically does is it means that you can hear what you're sending to your foldback section there. Okay, so that's what's there. Speakers is the in-studio monitors in the studio, and foldback is the dedicated headphone mix. That's these parts over here, left and right here. All right. Here, this is our control room section. This is number 5 and 6 in the master section picture. If we go back to that picture, it's down here in the bottom. And if we look here in here, what we're looking at is right over here on the board. So it's this, the master section is this section right here. So the part we were just looking at is right here, and then our right here is what we're looking at around our control room section. So if we go in here, this first part here is the control room source select, and that's what we're listening to in our control room. Most of the time it's going to be set to mix. Then we've got tape 1, tape 2, and tape 3. Then we've got our speaker select section here, number 3. This is what speakers we're listening on: main, alt 1, alt 2, alt 3, that kind of stuff there. Level up 1, 2, and 3 there. Then we got our main monitors here. This is how loud our monitors are going to be. Number 4 is the level, how loud it is. Number 5 is we're going to make it mono or stereo. Number 6, we can cut out the left or the right side. Number 8 is cut. Number 7 is dim, which basically, it doesn't mute it exactly, it just basically turns it down really low so you can still hear that it's doing something, but you can talk over it. You can have a nice conversation on it. So on this, number 8, this is basically mutes the control room. That when you're zeroed out, this should be muted, and also this one here, number 4, should be all the way to the left over here at 0. All right, number 7 in the master section picture, and again, it's this part right here. If we're looking at it from this angle here, it's this section right up here is what we're talking about. Okay, we have our oscillator here. The oscillator section makes a test tone for troubleshooting. Number 1 here changes the frequency. You can push these buttons down in different combinations to make different frequencies. They're all listed right here. Number 2 is the bus or the mix. Number 3 is the level, how loud that oscillator tone is. And number 4 is the on-off switch for it. Number 5 is the solo section here. And here you can, this number 5 here is how loud that solo is going to be. Number 6 is the mix for it. Now this is an interesting feature on here that you don't have on very many mixers, you don't have it in many DAWs. We can have, it's called solo in front, and basically what it does is it allows you to mix between having it be completely soloed, so it's just playing that one sound, or you can have it so you can hear the rest of the mix, but the solo part is louder than everything else, so you can just hear it with everything, but you still hear it kind of spotlighted. So if we turn it over here to solo, this is basically a mix knob. So turning it to the left is going to be solo, so that's going to be only that soloed sound, whatever is pressed soloed on it. But if we turn it more into the middle, we're going to hear it with the mix. So we've got the mix playing, and then we've got the solo playing there. And so you can have it so they're kind of how much you want to hear it there. Number 7 is solo in place. Solo in place basically means that whatever you're hearing is what's actually going to your recording as well. So you don't want to have that turned on if you're recording multi-track and you want to solo something. And then we have after fader and then pre-fader, and then this one here up is after fader, down is pre-fader. Basically you want it to be pre-fader or sorry, after fader if you're recording stuff. So you got to be a little bit careful about that. All right, number 8, this is the compressor in our master section. It's our mix bus compressor. Remember, this affects everything going through the left-right mix bus. You cannot assign this into specific channels. So if you want to use this, you have to basically bounce it out to a 2-track at some point. Now, this is what people would use a lot on the SSLs. That's why the SSL bus compressor is so famous, and people use it on all sorts of stuff, not just on the bus mix. What they would do is they'd say like, wow, the drums sound really great going through this mix bus compressor. So we want to record the drums through this mix bus compressor. So what they do is they'd set it up to route into 2 tracks on their multi-track machine and record the drums back onto the multi-track machine. And then they could open up all those drum tracks that they had before, and now they've just got a stereo mix of the drums. Of course, what this means is you can't then go back and adjust that stuff later on. You can only, like once you've bounced it to a stereo pair, especially in the days of tape, you only can move forward from there. So nowadays we could run this into Pro Tools and just like deactivate all the tracks with the drums on it. So now we just have that 2-track bounce. But if you ever wanted to change it later on, you potentially could go back and do it. It would be kind of a pain, but you could do it. All right, just one more thing about this. I just want to reiterate this. It cannot be used on individual channels. It cannot be used on these individual channels here. So that's to keep that in mind. So here we have our gain reduction meter, so you can see how much it's reducing the gain. Number 2 is the threshold. Number 3 is your attack. 4 is your ratio. Number 1 and number 2 and number 4 are super important. Right there, super important. You have your makeup gain right there, and then you have your attack and your release here. And then you have the on-off switch, basically the in button. It puts it into the signal path on-off there. All right, and now if we go back to number 1 in the picture, that's this one right over here up top. Okay, if we go back to number 1 in the picture there, these are our stereo inputs. There are 4 of them. They can be used for all kinds of stereo devices, for example, CD players, effects returns, keyboards, all sorts of stuff like that. One thing to keep in mind is there's no EQ on these. Each one can be run into the routing matrix so only in the master. Yes, you're talking about the compressor here, Eduardo. Yes, this is only on the master. Only on the master. Okay, so here the stereo inputs, each one can be run into the routing matrix. And SAE, the Alesis MIDI verb, is normal to stereo input 1. Normal means that's the default setup for the room. We're gonna be talking at length about this, especially when we come back and talk about reverb. So I don't really want to get into these too much right now, but essentially these are just extra channels on your mixer just to bring in something that you don't necessarily want to EQ. You can have them go into the mix. You can push the mix button so you can hear them and they can go through everything into your 2-track recorder when you bounce stuff down. So they're essentially extra channels, but they don't have EQs on them or anything like that. Number 2 in the group in the master section picture over here, number 2, and then we're going to talk about number 3 next. Number 2 is up here. So these are the group out masters. These are the master levels for the group outs. Usually they can live at unity. So when you zero out the board, you put them here at 12 o'clock. They do not move. Most of the time they're not going to move. The only time you would want to have them move is if you're sending, let's say you have a group of drums and you want to send those drums to be recorded to 2 channels, then that's when you would maybe adjust these a little bit if you have all your drums mixed and they're going to group outs 1 and 2, for example, and maybe group outs 1 and 2 is clipping a little bit on your Pro Tools input. You can just turn them down on the master, group out masters there. Number 3 is the Aux Sends Masters. So that's your master levels for the Aux Sends, just like on any console you have any kind of mixing board, even small mixing boards have Aux Sends Masters. You must turn these up when using an Aux Send. They are zeroed out, they're all the way to the left, so there's not going to be any signal, and when you use them, I recommend 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock for your masters for each send. And this is the main part that people forget when they're using Aux Sends. So many times I've had people say, I'm not getting any signal in my reverb, I don't know what's going on, what's happening, Tony, I'm not getting any signal. And when I go in the room, the first thing I always check if they're complaining about reverb signal is I check the Aux Send Masters. That's the part that's almost always the problem for people. All right, so that is the end of that. I'm going to go ahead and pause that recording right there.